Good evening, everybody. It always takes a second for everybody to connect to audio. So there's this lovely interim moment where we're all kind of waiting. Always everybody is joining here. Everybody connected. Awesome. I think we are in good shape. A couple that are still connecting to audio. Sometimes you have to hop out and hop back in again, but please feel free if your connection is being feisty today, then you are welcome to do that. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Ginny, and I'm with Anderson's Bookshops, and I'd like to welcome you to this Anderson's Bookshop virtual author event tonight with Constance Sayers and Gwendolyn Womack in conversation. So we're really glad to have both of our authors with us tonight, as well as all of you joining us. I'd just like to take a minute to say thank you for taking the time to keep your eyes on another screen to talk about books with us. Anderson's, for those of you who are not familiar, is an independent bookstore. We are actually run and owned by the Anderson family and have been for going on 6 generations now. So your support is very personal to us. It's very much appreciated by us. And we just like to take a minute to say thank you for that. You have a lot of choices, maybe less than normal on what to do with your time these days, but we appreciate you spending some of that with us. So your support means we can continue to be here providing some content and some escape and reading for you during this pandemic time, but also then whenever we're past this in whatever form that may be, that we'll still be here in a variety of ways for you as well, and for our authors who we love to support. So of course, normally we would be doing this in person with in a normal year over 400 in-person events, but hopefully this virtual style will keep us all tied over until we can be together in person again, whenever that is, hopefully soon. Get your vaccine if you can. We have lots of other virtual events on the calendar for all ages and interests. We'd love for you to check out our website or on our social media to find your next event. A couple of things coming up tomorrow. We have Jessica Rubinkowski in conversation with Erin Craig, so 2 great YA authors, but have a lot of crossover appeal. Next week, we have Laura Munson in conversation with Lee Woodruff. And then next month, we have, starting off the month with Claire Lombardo and a bunch of other things going on. So please do check that out and join us for what interests you. But today, we're very happy to be discussing the ladies of the Secret Circus. We were talking about Washington, D.C. That's where my brain is. The ladies of the Secret Circus.
It is a bit of a tongue twister, I gotta say.
It's just, yeah, it's a longer name, but we're so happy that is out. And then have Gwendolyn here to join us in conversation. So I want to officially introduce you ladies. Constance Sayers is the author of A Witch in Time, a finalist for Alternating Currents 2016 Luminaire Award for Best Prose. Her short stories have appeared in Souvenir and Amazing Graces, yet another collection of fiction by Washington area women, as well as The Sky is a Free Country. Her short fiction has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. She received an MA in English from George Mason University. She lives outside of Washington, D.C. And like her character, I love this part of your bio, like her character in The Ladies of the Secret Circus, for many years, she was the host of a radio show from midnight to 6. Okay. And our conversation moderator today, who's originally from Houston, Texas, Gwendolyn Womack, studied theater at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and holds an MFA in directing theater, video, and cinema from California Institute of the Arts. She is the USA Today bestselling author of The Fortune Teller and the RWA Prism Award winning reincarnation thriller, The Memory Painter. She resides in Los Angeles with her family, and The Time Collector is her most recent book. So welcome to you both. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to you guys, and we'll, if anybody has questions as we go along, please feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll get to those a little bit later in the hour.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and take the hot seat. I was really excited to be invited to talk with Constance today about her latest novel. And it's just, first off, it's gorgeous. It is just gorgeous. And, you know, I am such a fan of yours. I read A Witch in Time, and it's, you know, your writing is one of those, you have this experience of just the pages fly, and your writing is so effortless and just so absorbing. And you know, it's literally like drinking a fine wine. You look down at your glass, you're like, did I drink that much? You know, just the time goes. So, you know, it really was the same with the Ladies of the Secret Circus as well. And, you know, I was really excited to talk to you about it tonight. And I'm going to just kind of kick off my questions, starting with, when did you know you wanted to be a novelist, and when did you start writing both of, you know, I mean, I guess, did A Witch in Time come first, and then you had the idea for the Ladies of the Secret Circus, or how did it, you know, share with us about that, your writing journey to becoming a novelist?
Well, yes. And first of all, I'm going to fangirl for 1 second. You are like a kindred spirit to me. I mean, I remember when I was writing A Witch in Time, and somebody sent me The Fortune Teller, and I remember and then The Memory Painter. And those are both books about reincarnation or particularly Memory Painter. And I just remember thinking like, wow, like you just don't find that many books that were kind of in that space. And so I just remember just so admiring both of those books. And then when you were so kind as to read A Witch in Time, and you were one of the very first people to give me a blurb, which asking for blurbs is really hard, especially when you're a debut writer. And to have and I remember you sent this beautiful thing out on Twitter, and it was just so, for me, just for a fangirl moment, you were my hero, and to have that, to have you even here tonight talking to me is just amazing.
Oh, thanks.
But in answer to your question, I wish I would say that it was like some like lofty, like I began writing my own coloring books and things like that as a kid. No, actually it wasn't. My parents were, I'm a child of the early 70s, and my parents were like in their 40s, which at the time for that, it's okay now, but at that time they were much older parents than everybody else. They were tired. So they put me, they had I have an 18-year-old brother who's 18 years older than me, and my sister who's 12 years older than me. So they would put me, the first thing they did was they put me in front of the television to watch the Watergate hearings. So it's like, and I just remember as a kid, like loving television. And so my very first effort at writing was actually to write a soap opera. And I wanted to be a soap opera writer. And so I didn't have these like lofty, like, oh, I'm going to write, like Hemingway, I'm going to write like General Hospital. And so I wrote like a 300-page treatment, and I was in 7th grade. And my sister gave me her Smith Corona typewriter, and I moved my Barbie house out of the way, and I began to write in my dad's office, because I had like a little section of my dad's office that I was allowed to play in. And, and I would just get lost up there for, developing characters for hours, and then reading it to my friends, and they were very nice about it and everything. So I went to, my father really wanted me to be a musician, and particularly an opera singer. So I went into college to study opera, and I hated it. And I switched my major. I did not tell my parents, and switched my major to writing and never looked back. So I took all the workshopped myself to death in undergrad, and then went to graduate school while I was working full time in Washington, D.C. And went, and kept writing fiction. Most of it, when you're writing in workshop settings, it's mostly short fiction. But I wrote my master's thesis on the Barbie doll. It was a nonfiction master's thesis, and kind of had like a hybrid, like creative nonfiction, fiction master's degree. And then went to work, and work took over, and got married, that took over, and, and life just took over. And so then I think what happened was, I would go and I would like work on these books, and and they just really weren't going anywhere. So the first book that I actually like finished, I did it in National Novel Writing Month. I did whatever I could to get this draft finished, and then polished it, sent it out, and got an agent, Roz Foster from, at the time, Sandra Dykstra Agency. And I thought, okay, I got an agent, that's done, and I'm going to sell a book. And then my book didn't sell, and it shouldn't have sold. It wasn't very good. And it was good enough to have like an original idea that I think she saw something in my writing, but it certainly wasn't good enough to get published. And so I was devastated. I had a full-time job. I was like, I can't, it took me 10 years to write this. What am I going to do? And so I went back, and she's like, she's that other thing that you had, it was really good. It was about the witch, and she was like, just do that, and she was seeing my career as the longevity of it. I was seeing it as like one just big failure that first book didn't sell. And went back, and 5 months later gave her a draft of A Witch in Time. And she said she couldn't, she's like, I met with her for lunch. She's like, it was dog-eared. She said, I couldn't put it down. Well, nobody had said that about my earlier book, so, and in the process of researching A Witch in Time, I kept coming up against these Parisian circuses. And I was like, so that prompted the second book.
So the birth of the idea for the Ladies of the Secret Circus, where is it literally like a light bulb went off when you were doing the research and coming up with the circuses in A Witch in Time? And you're like, I'm going to do something that's going to revolve around this. Like, what was the birth? How, share with us the whole, the light bulb, like. the birth of this one?
Yeah, well, visually, they're just so interesting. And the French circuses in particular, there's just something so, that whole, like all the photos of them. And, I was, and you could like almost kind of construct a narrative from the photos. And so, it was kind of in the back burner. And so this idea of the winter circus started, and there actually is a winter circus. And I was like, okay, so I'm not going to do that. And just, I'm a big fan of HBO's Carnival. So like that was playing in the background. And then I just at one point was like, I wanted to do something period. I wanted to do something in 1925. And that was a good, vibrant time for Parisian circuses. And so I started to read more about them. This narrative started to snap in place. The one thing though that wasn't in place, and this is a very interesting part of the book, that book that didn't sell was Laura Barnes, that was left. So I actually, picked this characters up, probably when I went back, saved maybe 10 pages of that book. Like I said, it wasn't very good. When I read through it, I'm like, oh God, junk, and just basically overlaid her because I knew her really well. And I knew
That's great.
really well. And so putting her, I knew the framework that I wanted was similar to A Witch in Time. I wanted them to kind of have like if you like that book, you would like this book. And so I wanted that overarching framework of a modern day story, history interspersed. So that's kind of how they came together. And so stitching them together, I think, was the hard part.
That's so fascinating though, that you really already had that character. It's almost like you were subconsciously writing Ladies of the Secret Circus. I almost said service too. Circus.
They're they're like are the president.
And what about the radio show? I really want to know about that. So you did a radio show. Can you tell us about it? Like what?
It was WMK.
What did you play?
Yeah. WMKX FM in Brookville, Pennsylvania. And so it was about an hour and a half outside of Pittsburgh. And I started off, I wrote ads for them. And then they had an opening, like I was, kind of a part-time fellowship there, kind of writing ads. And they had an opening for a weekend DJ and it was for like Christmas and New Year's Eve. And like, cause everybody wanted off, from midnight to 6. So I went and I said, well, can I, read for it? And they said, sure. So I read for it and they called me and they said, look, we want to be really honest with you. You're awful. Like, you're so awful that like, don't get used to the chair. You are going to be there for 2 nights. We're going to teach you so that we can go party. And you're going to sit and do the midnight to 6 for Christmas Eve and then New Year's Eve. I said, absolutely, sure. Great. Whatever. Just teach me what to do. 4 years later, I was still there. And then 4 years later, I had graduated to the jazz show in the morning. I'm just like this tenacious, man. I wasn't, and it was album oriented rock. So it was, which wasn't, I was more of a new wave kind of, punk kind of fan. And this was all like the Doors, the Beatles, the Stones, like deep into those albums stuff, which was kind of cool because it kind of, it rounded out my musical, knowledge in a way. And it's a lonely job. Midnight to 6, all the drunks are calling you and, it's like, and they want you to meet them after, I'm like, no. So you just kind of stop answering the phone, but it's a very reflective time. It's a lonely time. It kind of reminded me, if any of you guys ever watched The Fog, the John Carpenter's The Fog, Adrienne Barbeau is up in the lighthouse and she's the DJ, the midnight DJ. And I always thought like, what a cool job that was. So.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly cool.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Let's see. And, so your books are really genre blends, they're mysteries, they're supernatural, they're historical, they've got romance, they've got a lot of different genres woven in. And that just seems to be the wheelhouse of both of these. Is that really where you want to stay? Like, is that going to be your next book too? Like, is that your passion? Or are you going to explore, or are the stories going to take you elsewhere? Or how do you, speaking long term, how do you see yourself with your storytelling?
I think that my next story is more even of a dark fantasy. It's got, it takes place in 1967 on the set of a like a Dark Shadows kind of movie, and something goes terribly wrong, and there's a modern day documentary filmmaker trying to like make a documentary about this film. So you've got like a film within a film, which is like the way you
Oh,
get
cool.
straight. So I think that that's just kind of the way my brain, you know, you just kind of are who you are, and I think that that's just the way my brain processes stories, and so that's my next book. I do think that people have asked for Witch in Time for Luke's story, and I wouldn't mind revisiting that. And I think he deserves his own kind of like book. So I've started to noodle around with that. And then even Laura Barnes. I mean, I think, you know, I do leave my books a little open ended. I like that. I kind of like that Sopranos ending where it goes fades to black, and
Yeah.
you know, the director and the writer know I know the next phase, you know, I know the answers to things, but I kind of like for everybody else who's been invested to kind of put their own spin and their own vision on what happened next. But I love all the characters that I've created, and I could see a second book in both Ladies and A Witch in Time if people are interested in that. So
that's great. As far as your research for the stories go, because you know you do have all the historical, like what is your process with that? Do you write and research at the same time? Do you try and kind of fill up with the research first? And are you outlining, like kind of break down the construction part of it, especially with the research and history?
absolutely. Yeah. So I do. I mean, I don't know if this is the case for you at your publisher, but I send a treatment into usually a treatment with the first 25 or the first 50 pages to my editor, and just to have her get a sense for, like, she'll give me some feedback, like I'd steer away from this, do that, you know, but she, you know, she's very supportive. But that is like, that could be like 4 pages. And what I'll even do from that, I mean, I just, you know, I guess because I have a day job and I have so little time to really actually write, I'm not very precious about my writing. I like cut it out and stick it. That's chapter 5. This chapter 6. So I get like this like guerrilla document, and I start, you know, working on it. I believe that you have to have a really good, like I think I read something about you with The Memory Painter. You saw that very first scene where he was painting and speaking Greek. And so I often have that first scene and that last scene in my head. And then, you know, and then I have like, kind of like, then you have like the work to do, you know what I mean?
Right.
Chapter is like this, it's a utilitarian in a way. This one does this with, you know, and I plot those entirely out and then I'll just like spend like a day, you know, working on chapter 4 where I know the outline, what I have to do. My first drafts are terrible. I mean, they are really, really rough and really terrible. And I am often, you know, at the same time doing historical research and plunking stuff in. And then I go and smooth it out, and I'll see where I have holes. And I'm usually, by that point, I'm so immersed in the research that I know specifically what I'm looking for. Like, I'll give you an example. So the Brown Derby restaurant in A Witch in Time, I remember finding the exact restaurant that, like, I could have like said, okay, they're having this for dinner. No, I wanted the exact menu from the Brown Derby at that time. And they had like Cherry's Jubilee, and they had things. And I found that, you know, and I remember, you know, it's such a small detail, but for me, it was just such a, you know, and probably as a reader, you didn't notice it. It wasn't that, you know, but for me, those are the things. Then I go back and I kind of like almost paint those in. But, you know, often, you know, I was asked recently about, if I have suffered from writer's block. If I am suffering from writer's block, it's because I have either, I don't have my research. I don't know what the next step is. I'm not particularly inspired. So I need to go, you know, read some things that kind of like jar and spark that, that next page. But, you know, for me, it's also 1,000 words a day. If I'm writing, I'm pretty faithful about that. And, you know, some days 3,000 words can come, and they can come effortlessly. And then some days I struggle for 500, you know? And so it's, and if I have more in the tank, I stop. And then I let the, you know, to come, because, you know, I hate to say this, but just for me, for that first draft, and I don't know if this is the case for you, I really fight with myself for that first draft. That's a really hard one.
Yes,
on the page.
it's the hardest. Yeah, I love rewriting. The first draft's the hardest, and I will wait too for the, if I know where I'm going, I'll wait. Because then the next day is so much better because you're already raring to go and you know what you're going to write. And then it makes the, yes, definitely. I'm the same.
Absolutely. And that does not mean like plotters and pantsers, that whole kind of debate. I'm a plotter, but that does not mean that I don't let my story, like where it starts off in that ridiculous like guerrilla document is not where it ends up. I mean, like, for example, in this book, Teddy Barrow was a very minor character. In Ladies of the Secret Circus, I think he becomes her balance. They're both seeking the same thing, and he just emerged as a much bigger character than I ever thought he would. Esme also a much bigger character. And those are the surprises that you have to, as a writer, that's the joy of writing. Otherwise I'm just going to go write a business document. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is what your brain starts to like feed you gifts, and that's, you got to go with them. I'm sure
that's the exciting part of it. Yeah, definitely.
Now, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Are you what are you?
So I'm very much I'm pretty much the same as you, where I do have a kind of very loose outline where I know all the I call them compass points. I know where the compass is going to get me through the forest. But yeah, I want to be surprised, and a lot of stuff the finished story is not what the original treatment or outline ever looked like. So, and that's really, that is the fun of it is.
And do you have that moment when you like read the book, you're like, good Lord, I mean, I wrote that, and you're like, oh my God, like, I just like my brain just sometimes I'm like, what the heck is going on in there, But,
it's funny, after I turn in the first past pages, I don't want to read it ever again because I can't change anything. That to me is the writer in me is always going to want, oh my God, why is that comma there? What is that word doing there? And so, yeah.
Or now listening. Oh my God. I remember listening to A Witch in Time and hearing like one, and I was like, and on the calling, I'm like, oh my God, they've got to like, like that, and so it's even, it's like immersive now. You like hear it, you like, you're Kindle, you're.
Oh yeah. So, and let's talk about some of your favorite books you've been reading lately. There's been some really exciting stuff coming out this year. What
right now I'm reading the what is it, the Lost Apothecary. That's really amazing.
I just read that. It's so good.
Yeah. It's really good, and I would recommend that. And then The Midnight Bargain is CJ Polk also. So that is a book that was edited by Sarah Guan, who found me at, and so those, she's the editor on Midnight Bargain, and I think that's a Nebula finalist also, and so that is a really great book, and that's about it's a fantasy. It's about another world where you have to, if you're getting married, they chain you and take your magic away. And so it's definitely got like Handmaid's Tale kind of like aspects to it. And then I'm a big fan of oh God, why am I having one of these moments?
I do have them all the time.
I know oh my God, what's it called? It's the okay, I'll find it. Yesterday I couldn't cast an actress.
Oh, I'm sure I remember. So
anyway, I'll remember it.
As far as reading for fun when you're writing, do you kind of take breaks, or how does that sometimes, like when I'm writing, I don't particularly want to read, or you're just so you can do, it's a free for all, anything goes.
I remember, going in graduate school and never reading books for fun because I felt guilty about that. I kind of feel the same way about writing. It's just, I feel like I should be writing and not reading, but you need one for the other. And I can say this, if my writing is flat and it's not inspired, it's because I'm not reading enough. And so I do try to, there's a great line from Philip Meyer, who wrote The Sun. He gave an interview to the New York Times, and I cut it out and keep it. And I've talked about this a lot. He said that he builds his reading program for what he needs to do for writing. And so he will actually, if he's looking at structure, if he's looking at character, he's actually picking books that speak to that, and designs his writing. And he said, you must, as a writer, train your mind as an athlete trains their body. Well, I mean, that is amazing. And, if only I did that, so but also sometimes it's nice to, have your brain, like, have a rest. I mean, I also get as much from like Sabrina or Supernatural or Carnival or things like that as I do, because I'm also a very visual, so for me, like, even seeing things like that, I love that as well. So I wish I read more, but there's,
and I feel like you write incredibly fast. Like, what's the timeline? Like, the time between A Witch in Time and the Ladies of the Secret Circus. Yeah, I mean, so kind of walk us through the timeline. How long did it take you to write A Witch in Time, and then when did you start and finish Ladies of the Secret Circus?
Well, it took me 10 years to write the first book that didn't sell, which was called Rustic Mornings. And so, and then A Witch in Time, from that was probably, by the time I started it to the time we turned it into, probably 2 years, until from inception to we turned it into Hachette. And so the problem, and I think you probably know this, the problem is you sign it, all's well and good. You have all this time to kind of like create your masterpiece, and then you sign a book contract.
Yeah, it changes.
And then you're on a cadence. And if you're not used to that cadence, so for me, the cadence was I had another book due in a year. And so, I mean, I cannot tell you, and I've been talking to other writers, the misery of like book 2. And I'm sure I don't know if your cadence was the same, but that was really tough to turn around. And I love this book. I didn't feel like I was able to necessarily kind of go through my normal process. So, I learned a lot by creating book 2. I don't know how you feel about that, but I've heard other writers. I mean, we've talked about how the fact that you have to like pivot really quickly and then turn in another book. And so the process for me was, I mean, just ruthless writing. And I mean, I'm not going to lie. It like nearly killed me. I mean, it was
no, it's hard. It's a double-edged sword, because it's like, you feel once you finish the first book and it's actually coming out, you feel this amazing sense of like, oh my God, I wrote a book and I want to write the next one so fast. And, there's this kind of kinetic excitement, but you forget how hard it is, because it's literally so hard. Just writing a book is relentlessly hard. And, yes. And to have that time constraint and people now are waiting for you, it's a whole different situation. Yeah,
absolutely. And then you also kind of have, like, I'm writing book 3 right now while I'm promoting book 2. You know what I mean? So you're kind of like, okay, you're like, woo, I want to promote book 2. And I got book 3, and book 3 is like, what are you doing thinking about time? And so I don't, I try to write every day when I'm in that zone, and and I will say that, like, I do fight with myself, but when you kind of get into that, it's almost like exercise. Like you do get better. Like things just start to appear, connections start to make. I'll be driving down the road and I'll be, oh my God, that, once I'm in that groove, I am in that groove, but it's tough. I mean, it was, learning to like be on someone else's schedule versus my own, for like the unlimited time I had to write my masterpiece, you know what I mean?
Right.
It was different. It was a change.
And you sound really disciplined. I mean, 1,000 words a day, like how many days a week do you do that? And, do you carve out, like, I need to write, these 2-3 hours a day, no matter what? Like, what is your actual schedule like?
Well, I learned that in National Novel Writing Month, which I did twice and I only finished once. But it really was ingrained in me, which is just get it down and stop. I mean, I used to do what everybody does, write the first 50 pages and agonize over them and go again and again and again over my first, and then, I didn't, there's a lot of work in the middle and there's a lot of work in the end, kind of holding interest in the middle and then kind of wrapping up and tying and, never mind plotting and never mind, And so, I definitely think that for me, I write, it takes me probably about an hour and a half to write 1,000 words. And I find myself usually doing it at the end of the night, which is bad because I'm usually tired.
Mhm.
And I will try to get up, sometimes walk the dogs, and then do it in the morning as well. So I mean, I just do it whenever I can, and and if for some reason I couldn't do it the night, I mean, I couldn't do it in the morning, then I'm doing it that night late. But you just, when you're doing National Novel Writing Month, you're actually writing 1,600 words a day.
Mhm.
And they make you just do that. But like, if you think about it, if you just do that for a month, you've got 50,000 words. If you do it for 2 months,
Right.
you've got 1,000 words, and
Mhm.
so you just like, I just can see the end there, and I'm like, okay, great. Now I've got my draft. Now I can go and I can,
Mhm.
I can get to my favorite, which is revision 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah. And as far as like your wordsmithing is just so beautiful. It's I just love your style and voice. So, I mean, do you read aloud? Do you, as far as tinkering, like getting that finesse going, like how does that work for you? Do you print out and just, you know, do pen and paper, or,
I do, yeah, I do pen and paper. I mean, I do some pen and paper, and I put notes in. But then, I do read aloud. I think that the wordsmithing and the tinkering on that is probably one of the last things that I do. That's probably like draft 3,
Mhm.
and that's really, I mean, after, because I just feel such pressure to, like, it's plot, are there plots, holes in the plot,
Yeah, the big stuff.
character, then I'm making sure the historical stuff is accurate, because especially in like Witch in Time, it was like you had so many multiple time lines going, you
Mhm.
had everything going. I mean, that was really tough to kind of like, I felt bad for my editors on that. That they really worked hard on that. And but like, and so then you're looking at the wordsmithing, and I have to say, like, I think that I learned a lot. I went to a class in Italy for the summer back in 2000, and I worked with poet Marie Howe. And
Mhm.
I don't know anything about poetry. And I, took her class, and I said, look, I don't know anything about poetry. And she said, yeah, you do. And so, and it was one of the most helpful classes in terms of being very precise with the language that you want, and to like go back and to kind of like work on that. And like, so I've kept that with me. There's always those things that you kind of keep with you in your toolbox as
Mhm.
a writer. And that's
Mhm.
definitely one of the things for me. I mean, your writing is also just absolutely beautiful. I mean,
Oh, thanks. Well, I love your writing. So, I'm trying to think. Well, as far as like your research right now, like what's really fascinating you for your upcoming book that you're reading or watching, that's kind of helping your story come together.
Um, I am. I'm a little haunted right now by Catherine Deneuve's sister, Francois d'Orléac. I don't know if is a really tragic story. She's the older sister of Catherine Deneuve. They did a movie together. She was Francois Truffaut's girlfriend and muse for a little bit. I mean, he did The Soft Skin, which was a movie for her, and she died tragically in a car wreck on her way to the airport in Nice, and she burned to death in the car wreck. And it's just, she is a very fascinating, her life was very fascinating. You don't really hear a lot about her.
Mm.
And Catherine Deneuve wrote a book about her, and after having not talked about her sister for many years. And I'm just really fascinated with like, like kind of like that time frame, and kind of like, she's been on my mind a lot. And
Mm.
Dark Shadows has been on my mind a lot, like, the films, particularly with like Kate Jackson and stuff like that, and so I have this whole like idea though of like, a 1960s film set, and something kind
Mm.
of goes wrong. And then you have, the modern day, documentary filmmaker who's just kind of, like, you know, so now I'm all the French New Wave stuff. I think that's what the fun for me is. And then also, just kind of like looking up, doing a fair amount of research on Truffaut and all of the directors. And I've been,
Mm.
Roger Vadim and all the, like, and for me, that's the journey. Like, I'm kind of
Mhm.
learning up all about that, and, and then trying to put that into a narrative. So,
For
and then
the Oh,
Gothic.
sorry.
Oh yeah, then Victoria Holt Gothic, romances and things like that. I mean, just, because then I want to kind of like
Yeah, I
have
love Victoria Holt romances.
yeah.
I grew up reading those. Um, for the ladies of the Secret Circus, what you were just saying kind of sparked it, because I want to go back to that book. What was the most fascinating thing that you discovered in your research that made it into the book and became kind of one of your favorite,
Oh yeah,
stories?
there is a book called The Recipes of the Lost Generation. And I just happened upon it. I got it in a used bookstore, and here's Hemingway's beef recipe, and he drank this with it. Here's Man Ray's
Wow.
chicken, and it's not a cookbook. I mean, it is, but it's like what they ate, how they ate it, what they were doing with it. I can't tell you, it was the most essential thing that I had in terms of writing, because it was very helpful about what were the in vogue cocktails of the time, what the
That's
ingredients
awesome.
and the ingredients that were available in Paris at the time. And it was just an invaluable, I mean, it just goes to show you the things, like, it's not just straight up history. It's, food, the history of food, and the idea of French onion soup, and the fact that they use the red onions, that there's that scene that I have with Emile Giraud and Cecile, where they're sharing soup together, and that all kind of came out of that book.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow, what a great find.
It was a real find. Yeah.
And what was your favorite, if you had to pick? I mean, it's hard to do, but if you had to pick, say, a favorite scene that you just love to write, what would it be in the book?
It would probably be, the circus scene was fun. When she gets into the circus, it was almost like Alice, kind of landing down the rabbit hole. And I approached it kind of in that way. And you have just this, and you've been introduced to it a little bit, so it's somewhat familiar. And then you're seeing it completely new, where if Cecile, it's her home, then you see that, like, Laura's like, this place is crazy, and it is, and it's kind of, so I think that was probably my favorite scene. Maybe my second scene also was the ball where she sees Todd.
Okay.
That was a really special scene.
That was really good. And then what I just blanked on my question. I did have a different question. Did you want to read tonight? Are you going to read a little bit?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah, if ever.
I would
Yeah,
love to,
while people are thinking up their questions, so I actually am going to read.
I do remember my question. When people ask you what is the book about, what's your short, explanation to describe the ladies of the Secret Circus?
A woman's journey. It's a quest. The book is a quest. Both of my books are a quest, and a quest through time, or through, in this case, perhaps through the underworld. It's one of the greatest, she journeyed to the underworld to find out answers about both her life and her love, what happened to him. And I think that's really kind of at the heart of what the book is about. So do you want me to? Yeah, so I'll start.
Yeah, please.
Okay. At the foot of the Grand Palais Brongnière, at the corner of Rue Vivienne, Laura looked down at her watch, 5 minutes until 11. The imposing building in front of her was too large to be so quiet. Moonlight illuminated the fronts of the pillars. The waiter at the bistro across the street was stacking chairs in an effort to close. During the day, this part of Paris was buzzing with offices and businesses, but at night it was nearly abandoned. Other than the waiters and the occasional couple on their way home, there was nothing here. She looked down at the ticket and confirmed the streets. The courtyard in front of her was empty and dark. She paced, her heels clicking on the cement. Turning, she thought she heard something behind her, footsteps. She kept pacing. If anyone was watching her, she'd pretend like she was waiting for someone. She was waiting for someone. She regretted not telling Gaston that what she was doing tonight, but she didn't want to worry him or Barrow. After the woman had chased her, she should have been more careful. Though she cast a protective spell again tonight before she left the hotel, she looked down at her watch again, 3 minutes until 11. All she had to do was hold this woman off for 3 minutes. Alcazar would find her. The night in Paris was sticky and warm, giving little relief. Feeling the need to dress for the occasion, she'd worn a black denim dress with strappy heels, like she was going to dinner or a concert. Slung over her arm was a denim jacket. And then she heard it again, the clicking of heels, a woman's heels. Laura spun. The noise was coming from the corner near Rue Vivienne, where the streetlight was out. She felt a chill run up her neck. Come on, come on. She looked around for something to change. Silently, she began to chant, Braccatus Locius Tegratato. Braccatus Locius Tegratato. From a distance, she heard the church bell begin to clang. It was 11. As if her vision were bending, she saw the pillars in front of her warp. At first, it was small, like a ripple when you throw a small stone in the water. Within seconds, the smooth waves became more pronounced, like someone was trying to tear through the scene. The streetlights dimmed, making charged noises as the scene in front of her, the massive building with pillars, gave way. In its place emerged a giant round arena with an opulent gold entrance complete with a devil's open mouth. Laura gasped. The devil's mouth. It was just as Cecile and Barrow had described. Looking back toward Rue Vivienne, she thought she saw the outline of a woman standing under a dead street lamp waiting. She stared at the direction, letting the woman know she wasn't backing down. Straining her eyes in the dark, Laura couldn't make out if this was the same woman from the Père Lachaise. There was a steady hum, as if a fluorescent light had just been turned on after a lengthy recess. 4 sets of pillars led the way to the door, gas lights illuminating the path. Like a picture coming into focus, the circus with its matinee sign became clear. Laura looked down at her ticket. If she threw the ticket down now and ran, would this scene disappear? Tempting though it was to flee, she stared at the figure of the woman standing in the shadows. If she didn't go through the doors to the Cirque Secret, then she had to face whatever was out there, knowing it was the woman. No, it was safer to be inside this circus. Blinking, she took the scene in front of her. The entire circus had just materialized in front of her eyes, supplanting a Parisian landmark. Laura looked around. The waiter at the nearby cafe continued to stack chairs as though the entire square had not transformed in front of him. Without a ticket, perhaps it hadn't. For goodness sake, get in or get out. Laura looked around the pillars to find a clown holding a miniature version of himself, a ventriloquist dummy, Doro. From Cecile's journals, Laura felt like she already knew him. Yes, you. The clowns were dressed identically, all in white, from the white face paint to the fez hat to the costume. Above her, a horse whinnied. Was the statue alive as well? Amazed, she spun around, not unlike Dorothy, who had just entered Oz. Ms. Barnes, the dummy's hand pointed to the door. This way, s'il vous plaît. As the clown walked, the dummy peered around him. I am Doro, or he is. The little wooden hand pointed up to the clown, who held out his hand to claim her ticket. She was reluctant to give it up. The ticket does not belong to you, snapped the dummy. It was the same dread she'd felt entering a fake haunted house for Halloween. She expected to be entertained, yet there was a foreboding sense in the background. Laura nodded and handed the larger clown the ticket and watched as it melted into his hand. As she stepped onto the carpet, it rolled up behind her, giving her the sinking feeling that perhaps the ticket was one way. So.
You always give the best endings on scenes and chapters, you know, just go for the jugular. It's really good.
Well, if you guys,
Hey,
sorry,
Jenny.
go. Oh, hello. I'm back up in the corner. I don't want to pin myself so that you guys can stay the focus, but if you're ready, we can get to some questions if you'd like.
Perfect. Yeah.
I didn't. So one question, a fan was disappointed that the Gaithersburg Book Festival was canceled last year. So many things that were canceled that we were all disappointed about, right? Was hoping to meet you there. What other authors do you enjoy reading?
Gwendolyn or me?
It's not addressed actually to either specifically. So
Go ahead.
both of you can go ahead and answer.
I am a big fan of Susanna Clark. I love Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, probably absolutely one of my favorite all-time books. I am a big Greer McAllister fan. The Magician's Lie was one of my favorite books as well. And those are the two that come to mind.
Okay.
I don't know who you like, some of your favorites are.
Oh, I love Alexie Harrow or Haro. I don't know how to say her last name. I love her writing. She's really one of my favorite authors. B. Schwab, I love her.
Love her.
The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I just love that book.
Wonderful.
Madeline Miller. I love her.
Oh, Circe
Yes.
was fabulous.
Yeah. So,
Anne Rice.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
She's the,
Yeah. I just love so many, I love Blake Crouch. Am I saying his last name right? He's a great thriller writer. Dark Matter, Recursion. Those are like, I just gobble those up. That's like candy to me. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's been some great, in recent years, I mean, it's always been existent, but I think in recent years, it's gotten more attention of kind of what you guys write of the magical blended with the realistic, and just that making that seamless. And those are, in addition to you guys, some great authors that do that very seamlessly. Okay, so Kate, not a question, just she loved the book and would like more of Laura Barnes' story, please. So you've got to vote for that. If anybody else has questions, you can put those in the chat.
And the Gaithersburg Book Festival is also going to be, I am appearing there again this year. It's my, one of my hometown book festivals, but it is going to be virtual, unfortunately. Again, I mean, that's this year as well, but I think they are definitely making plans to do it like they did it before.
Oh, good. Is that a springtime? I don't know what time of year that one normally is.
May,
So,
May,
okay. Yeah. Yeah. There's been a lot in the industry of at least the first half of the year. Everything's kind of going to stay the way it was. I mean, I think it's the Paris Book Fest that just canceled they were going to have to move it and then they canceled it. So, second half of the year, I think is a little more up for grabs. We kind of got to see how, the world goes, but
I have a question for Gwen. Gwen, what are you working on now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm working on several things. I'm actually working on a middle grade story for kids that I'm hoping to talk about soon. We'll see. My publisher, Picador, is not doing publishing original books anymore. So I'm kind of my 3 books with them is all that will be with them. So they restructured their company. So I've been I'm working on something that's one of those like, oh my gosh, this might take me 10 years to write. It's one of those, like, I don't know how quickly I can write that. But so right now I'm focusing on the middle grade for, it's a kid's story I've been wanting to tell, which has been fascinating.
Your books are, they're complex and they're layered. And so I would imagine that they do take, and I think you keep upping, as a writer, I think you want to keep upping the ante. Like every time you want it to be just a little bit. It's like, who can I do this now? Can I do that? I don't know if you feel that way, but
you kind of have to just, go where your inspiration and intuition takes you. So, when I had the kids story idea, I'm like, am I really going to attempt to write this? And it's like, well, I have to, I just, there's just no other way around it. So we'll see. But
do you both find that once there's an idea in your head for something that it has rent in there until you get it out in some form? I would imagine, that's even if it's like if it turns into just a piece of a different story, a different book. So once that idea was in your head, Gwen, I'm sure it's just
won't go away.
Needs to get out in some way.
I remember Barbara Estman was one of my instructors for something, and she said, do you all like sit at the stoplight and like think about your characters? And we were like, oh yeah. Hey, you're weird people. You're like, because most normal people don't, you that's just definitely, so it like starts to occupy that space, and it starts to just like, my characters like won't, especially when I'm writing about them, they are like, like
when I'm driving, I get so much. And it's funny, driving my son to school, when I was writing The Memory Painter, there's this scene that's just so gut-wrenching and sad, and I was constructing it while I'm driving him to school, and I'm full out crying thinking of this scene, going, oh my gosh, and I'm like, I can't show up to a school like in
it's
tears,
like method acting almost,
so I'm like, I gotta quit thinking of the sad stuff when I'm driving, so school's gonna think I'm crazy.
Well, I don't think thinking about your characters at stoplights makes you weird. I think it just makes you a writer. I mean, you've got stuff in your head that you got to work through. I think that's the way it goes. Okay, a couple more questions here. Do you know the ending when you start the book or partway through? Just to both of you.
In both first 2 books, yes. The current book I am writing right now, it has been a bit elusive. So new with this one. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Did that surprise you that you expected it to be the same, Constance?
Yeah, this one, it's like this one's a little different. It's like, it's a little different dance.
Yeah. And Gwen, what do you think?
Oh, I was just I do know the like kind of what I want the last page to look like, but I don't know how it's gonna get there, but it helps me.
Okay. Here's a question. Does music influence your writing? Do either of you write with music in the background?
I'll let you go.
You mean,
Oh.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Meanie.
Oh yeah. I mean, so I like the Chill channel on Apple, the iRadio,
Apple Music, yeah.
whatever. And they keep changing the name of it. The Chill channel is amazing because I don't really like to hear words. I just need to like have music in the background. However, music is in both of my books. You know, the first one was a piano player, and the second one, you know, she's a DJ. So I actually have 2 Spotify lists that I created just because I think it's just so important. Like I just put all the music down into 2 Spotify lists. So if you like the books and you like that, I've actually compiled them with love.
Awesome. So, yes. Gwen, what about you?
Yeah, I like to loop a song when I write a scene. So I'll find a song. I spend like hours finding it, and then I loop it maybe like days, weeks, however long I'm writing that chapter. And then I don't. It actually helps me get back into the scene really quickly. So yeah, so you know, my family thinks I'm nuts because I'm always literally looping the same song over and over again. But it becomes so part of the writing. But yeah, definitely no words. I can't write to words.
Like what's an example of that? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like what
you know, like when I was writing the Time Collector, you know, maybe going back to the periods, I would find just that one piece of music and just loop it while I was writing that chapter. Or like when Rowan is rock climbing, I went and found rock climbing, like hard driving music that the rock climbers were climbing to, and I would just loop that song over and over, you know, so just it's on repeat forever. So.
I think that's brilliant though. I mean,
that's brilliant.
There's so many studies about what music does to your brain and how it takes you back with memories, right? And for how that, you know, you hear a song that you haven't heard in a while, and all of a sudden like you're in high school again, it's the first day of school and you remember exactly what it was or whatever the moment is. So that actually makes quite a bit of sense, but it's about, you know, how music and writing are both different kinds of art, and they make us have those feelings. I can totally see how, you know, writing a difficult scene or a romantic scene, you'd want something in your head that puts you in that place. I think that makes perfect sense. That's really great.
I love that.
Yes. And people are commenting too, it's great to hear about writing process. Customer here, Jeanette, is a writing teacher, and it's always nice to share with students that even real authors struggle. And yes, absolutely. I've seen that too. And speaking of students, so a question here for Gwen, how is the approach for writing an adult book, or how is your approach for writing different for a middle grade book from an adult book?
You know, it was really a fascinating journey switching from adult to middle grade. And I have to say, it took me a while to find the kid's voice. And, you know, at the beginning, it was really just I was so caught up in the plot. And I was also not, I don't know how to explain it. I was not, it was almost like I was treating it like a kid's book as opposed to an adult book. And I had to get out of that. It had to just become the story, you know, so you kind of have to mentally get out of the space, like you know, I'm writing this for an adult versus a kid. And that just took time to where, you know, word choices or, you know, flow. But, you know, for me, it was once I found the humor and once I found the voice of the character, and it just took many drafts to get there, and lots of reading, you know, just reading other middle grade to just be inspired that, you know, get, you know, you can be lyrical, you can create this, you know, poetic, you know, stuff and have a fun plot and put it all, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but it was hard. It was really, you know, a super duper challenge to shift from adult to a middle grade. And it's probably just you know, different for every writer who's going to try it. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I've definitely had conversations with picture book authors who I think very legitimately say that writing a picture book is actually very difficult to get it right, which if you've seen maybe a not so great picture book, you put it next to ones that really work, it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly what that is, but that's definitely true. That's definitely true. This is a great question here from Christine. Do you ever stop reading a book? And if so, how do you decide when?
I do. I mean, just because I just don't have a lot of time. So if something isn't, if something isn't, I mean, I'll go through periods of time where like 3 or 4 books and I'll give it a shot and I'm just like, okay, it just isn't connecting with me. And then you find that book, I mean, and you just like can't, like, like The Gargoyle, or a few other that I just can't, or like V.E. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I mean, where you just can't put them down. And it's just, and you just realize like what a gift that is to have that. And so, yeah, I just don't, I used to try to like, go through and finish everything. I had a cousin who like would absolutely never, she finished every book she ever started. I give myself permission to not do that.
Right.
Yeah, me
right.
too. Yeah. I just don't have time to get through a book. I'm just not, my heart's not into reading it. So yeah. I know within the first couple pages if I'm going to really enjoy this book or not. So I'll generally give it a first chapter. And it's like, if I'm really, hooked and excited, I keep going, so.
Do you have a limit, Constance, where you give it, only 2 chapters or
I
something?
give it like 2 chapters. Yeah. Again, if I'm not, if I'm just not connecting, I sometimes I will like, sometimes you can feel, you have that book where like sometimes the chapter, like the first chapter is just a little off and like they're trying, and then you're like, you get into it, the second chapter is really good. So I will kind of go to the second chapter, but again, if I'm not feeling it beyond that, I just don't. And I think you have to give yourself permission to do that. It's like, okay, like, I just don't have the time to,
Right.
Well, especially a book that, if there's 2 storylines or 2 time periods, often, they'll start in one, and sometimes that second chapter is totally different, which I feel like you have to give that second chapter then a read, because it's a whole different thing. But I was to say, I used to always finish things. And I couldn't read more than one at once, and I didn't reread, but then I went into books as a career, and there's just, you should see the multiple to read piles that I have in my house. I'm sure you guys have them too. And that doesn't include all the books at the store. So, there's just not enough time. If you're just not loving it, then it's not going to be something that for me that I would recommend to a customer if I'm not loving it. So I get enough to understand, that's what this book is about. If somebody's looking for a book about this topic, I could recommend it. But in the meantime, there's too many books in the world. Yeah, for sure. But everybody is definitely different about that. Well, I think that's it so far on the questions, unless anybody else has one you want to drop in the chat real quick. And normally I wrap up by asking you guys what you're working on next, but I think we got a little sneak peek from both of you. So that's great. I'm thrilled to hear that you're both working on more things. Gwendolyn, I need to introduce myself to some of your works. But Constance, I can say that when Witch in Time came out, that was several people on staff who actually have very different tastes, that were not the people that I would have expected to find such a home in that book, that were immediately like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. It's going to appeal to so many different audiences. So that was a really cool experience. It doesn't often happen in the different personalities that are our booksellers.
Thank you. No, it's really sweet. It just, sometimes I went yesterday into the North Palm Beach, Barnes and Noble, and there it was in the front, and you still get that, and I signed them for them because I miss people.
Oh yes.
Can I sign the books? I'll sign the books for you.
Yes.
And it was just so nice, and I never tired of that. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Gwen, if you don't, you go.
Yeah,
and
no,
you go
I
into
love it. Yeah.
Well, clearly your next book, Constance, needs to be The Ladies About Secret Service, since I have now introduced that into the world. I'm so sorry.
You are not alone. It's like, so it's a tongue twister.
I think you could make that work, the Secret Service and what. I think there's things that could happen there, but there's all kinds of interesting stories about the presidents, right? So,
oh my goodness, yes.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for your time and for joining us and for sharing your creations with the world. We really appreciate it. And congrats, Constance, of course, on the new book. And I can't wait to see what's coming from both of you. Gwendolyn, we do kid stuff too. So hopefully whenever that is fully formed, we'll be able to.
And Gwendolyn, thank you. It's just
thank
nice
you. Yeah, it was so great
to
finally meet, on Zoom. But yeah.
So that's the fun thing that's been happening with these. We've had a bunch of authors that have never met before join, kind of e-meeting for the first time on Zoom, which is super fun. So, and thank you to everyone else for joining us today. If you did purchase a copy of the book, then you'll get an email from us when those are either ready to be picked up or are on their way to you via shipping, if that's an option that you chose. So hang tight and look for those. And that'll come through the event combo platform where you got your tickets. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to both of our authors. Be safe out there, everybody, and happy reading.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.